how do you figure out, like, you're working on something, you're working with somebody new, and they say to you, what's your rate? How do you answer that? How do you find your rate?
All right, let me start with a story then. So many moons ago, right, there was an artist that a lot of people might still remember his name because it's taught in a lot of classes, but Pablo Picasso was hanging out in a cafe and somebody asked him for a sketch. And so he did a sketch of, some doodle on a napkin, and he said, that'll be $1 million. And the person was like, what? And he told him, Pablo Picasso's reply was, well, actually, the person was like, how can you charge that much for a sketch? That seems outrageous to me. And Pablo Picasso said something to the effect of, well, I've spent my entire life learning how to do that sketch. So this is entire life's worth of effort and practice and learning to get to this point. So that's what you're paying for. So I'm just starting with that story to sort of give an idea of how one way for an artist to think about valuing themselves and their work, because it's not like if you're in it for the long run, if you're doing it as like I'm going to be an artist for life, I think it's useful to look at it as I am at any moment that somebody is hiring me or commissioning me for their work, they have to be aware, or they may not be aware, but you have to be aware that you are taking the practice of your entire life into that work. So budget accordingly, value your work accordingly. So next I'll start with my very first job, my very first client. I was paid $10 an hour to basically make a comic book. So I did everything. I like had to write it and do the roughs, and this was for like it was for a public service thing. So this was like a Louisiana firm who was working. They were doing some stuff with the government and doing like some public service stuff, and it was a project about drinking and driving, preventing like alcoholism amongst teenagers, whatever.
Okay.
So at the time I was like, okay, $10 an hour seems fine. I don't know how long it's going to take me to make this. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the time it seemed good, and I'm sure that was fine for that time because I mean I was still learning as an artist. I was still growing as an artist.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the project probably took, I don't know, it was probably a week's worth of work, and I got paid maybe at best 1,800 for it.
Okay.
Which is not bad. It's not
No,
bad. But here's the
1,800 for
thing.
a week's worth of work is not bad at all.
Yeah. And here's the other thing though, is like, so I mean, fortunately with that client, they had a lot of work they wanted to do with me. So I kind of, for a while, I would always have some more stuff to do with them. But if you're working as a freelance artist, 1,800 ain't nothing.
Yeah.
1,800 is not going to last you because you don't know when your next job's going to come, and you don't know
Right.
where it's going to come from. So part of what you have to think of in terms of budgeting, if you're doing freelance, speaking about salaried work, that's a whole other
Yeah.
avenue. Part of what you need to budget for yourself when you're deciding how much to charge, a client, needs to involve also, how like
Covering your bills in the downtime if there's not another
yes,
gig for 2 weeks. Right.
but also cost of something I never even thought of was cost of like your materials. And
Oh.
this is something I'm thinking more and more about, because if I ever do like and I've done a couple, but if I end up doing more commissions that involve like materials, like painting or whatever, because like a lot of the stuff that I do is digital.
Right.
So it's expensive up front, right? Like buying a computer is probably about it depends, anywhere between 700 to 2000.
Right.
But then also there's
Your
your
stylist, the tips that go along with it,
your
uh,
software, all that stuff. Up front,
batteries.
that's
Yeah, all that
yes.
stuff adds up. Sure.
Up front, it's really expensive, but over the long run is extremely cheap because you
Yeah.
basically just have to buy that one. That computer is going to last you if you're using it well, like a car or whatever, you're maintaining it, it's going to last you at least a good 7 to 10 years. And
Absolutely.
depending on what you're working in, that shouldn't be an issue. Like for myself, like as a digital illustrator, this like Lenovo Yoga laptop that I do all my work on, it's perfect. I don't need anything beyond that for that in particular. But if I ever start doing like 3D modeling or something, I would need to bump up. So like I've been doing a lot of, and this is tangential, but I've been doing a lot of like video editing lately just to kind of showcase some of my work. This laptop can't really deal with it very well in terms
Sure.
of like being able to preview while I'm working at the same time. Point being though, those are all things that need to be involved in your estimation of like how you value your own work. And of course, that's easier when the relationship is more like when somebody's coming to you, like, and so maybe another way of putting it is like, so if I get hired for a commission or somebody approaches me for commission work,
Mhm.
like, hey, I have this idea, I thought you would be a great artist to execute it. Like, I need an illustration for a short story or whatever. You have the opportunity, and that you as the artist have the opportunity. The ball's in your court to set what you want that rate to be. And if they don't want it, oh well, you can negotiate down. And if they still don't want it,
C'est
oh
la
well.
vie. Yeah, it is
Right.
what it is.
Somebody else will come along. Like, because that's the other aspect of it is and this becomes more as you become more in demand as an artist. So, going back to Pablo Picasso, like when you get to those higher echelons of being paid for what you do, you can really start to set the terms, right? But for you and me, like where we're at there's a lot of negotiating that has to take place because your clients also they have a budget that they have to
Sure.
work on. They only have so much money that they can spend for whatever it is that they're doing. But
I've found a lot of it is not to cut you off, but I've found
yeah,
that for me, a lot of it has been a couple years back. I started a Fiverr gig. Are you aware of that website at all? Fiverr, and it's a place for artists. And I think it was really just it was in kind of its infancy when I jumped onto it, and I was one of the first people on there that was offering screenwriting services, and I was writing scripts. I was writing like 10, 12-page scripts for about $5 a pop, which
yeah,
is a fucking steal to begin with.
right,
And what I learned as I went along was that after I built my reputation and I had all these, like, I had like a couple hundred ratings of 5-star, blah, 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 then I could start upping my prices because my schedule was filled so much. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that
yeah,
freelancer thing about
right,
filling in that downtime. There was no downtime. I was literally slaving. So in order to keep myself from driving off a cliff, I had to up my rate just to cut out people from considering me because I would be too out of their price range. And
yeah,
then it got to the point where I realized that I had to eat it for a while. I had to lowball myself and my qualities until I could prove where my skill level was at because I don't have the Spielberg name or anything like that, the Tarantino writing creds. I just I'm this guy on Fiverr and
yeah,
who the hell am I? But once I had that rating that next to my name and all those reviews, I had repeat customers, I had all that kind of stuff. I realized not only could I up my rates because of the security that I had built for myself, but I
yeah,
could also, and this is kind of a dick thing to do, but as an artist, I think you'll understand. I could turn down things that I had no interest in doing
Oh
that I
yeah.
knew were gonna bore the shit out of me and were gonna be a waste of my time. People would come to me and I would literally say to them, I would be like, this really doesn't interest me. They would still pursue me, and then I would quote them an astronomical price, like Pablo Picasso did in your story.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
thing to do, right?
because if I don't care about the project, if you're going to offer me $1,000 to write a 20-page script, shit, I'll do it for $1,000.
Right.
But you know what I mean. But for the going rate of the 200 or whatever that I got up to, no, not wasting my
Right.
time.
Well, and in another, and what is that? I think it's a Wayne Gretzky saying, "You miss 100% of the shots you never take," and it's worth taking those shots sometimes too, because if you even have, so for instance, like if I ever have a commission where it's like, oh, I somebody paid me $1,000 for that piece, that's now the new standard that I can set, right? Because
True.
as it becomes more common, as more people start doing that, it becomes, you can say, this is my standard
It's a premium
price,
service that you're offering.
right? If
Absolutely.
I'm paying you less, it's because I'm giving you a discount because you're a friend, family, whatever. You're
You
like,
have an
this is
interest in
something
a
special.
project, or yeah, whatever it may be. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Now,
I've actually this was actually a tip given to me by an artist at Helioscope Studio, and I really liked it, which was she was talking about when she would do like nonprofit work, or like some work for like an institution or somebody that she really appreciates and doesn't want to overcharge them on their budget. She will actually in her invoice list list like a discount, like, oh, here's a 30% discount on the service that I'm giving you, even though she is intentionally, negotiating with them, oh, I'll do lower than my standard, but on her invoice say 30%, because that way in the future, like if somebody else who is interested in working with her as a client
yeah.
goes to talk to, like maybe let's say it was the public library that she worked with, and
Yep.
they're like, well, how much did it cost to work with her? They go, oh, well, it cost this much for us, but we also got a discount. So
That's a
that,
smart move
yes, that
because I
gives more. Go ahead.
I've done that. I recently did that. I did videography gigs for the city that I live in, and I did not do what you said that she did, which was smart. Um, I looked at it and they were like, "Oh, it's a Veterans Day thing," and I was like, "Oh, okay, it's for the vets. I'll do it for cheaper than I normally do it." I did not list that on the invoice. So now I kind of lowballed myself, and now they assumed my going rate was the
Yeah.
same thing for everything. And instead of manning up and explaining to them that I had cut the price because it was a veteran service, I just ate it, and I did a couple more gigs at the same low price.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that was a very smart move to include that not only as a written proof, but as a line of communication with a client that they're getting a discount, because not only does that help you defend your cost in the future to other clients, but it also, I don't know, it makes that particular client feel special. Like, hey,
Yes.
we want to work with this
Exactly.
person more because
Exactly.
they acknowledge our hardship or whatever it may be, and they're doing good by us. So that's
Right.
actually really good. I'm going to take that into consideration. I was able to, since I got the kiddo now, the city backed off for a couple weeks, and they're like, "Oh, you have a kid, call us when you're ready to start doing stuff again." I have a feeling that when that happens, my rate will be going back up, and I'll be like, "Oh, it's the new year. The taxes went up in this city. What are you gonna do?" So, but in my future invoices, I think when I do stuff like a veterans gig or something like that, I'm going to do exactly what you told me. So I'm kind of glad you
Yeah,
mentioned that.
I like that idea a lot, and it's one of those things where, and I've already said this, but it's definitely important to consider the way that you are progressing, right? Because art is already lowballed standard, like in
Yeah.
society.
Everything is free. All art should be
Yes.
free in the eyes of the people who want it.
Right. And that's fine on a certain level, but ideally, like for myself personally, like my My ideal situation would be I'd have like a Patreon or whatever set up, and it's
Which you
like,
do.
and I
If you
do,
are
but in my
interested, you should go check it out. Matt J. Rainwater, Patreon.
my ideal is for whoever is reading what I do, if every single person who read my work paid me $1 a
Hmm.
month, I'd be good to go, right? But because the expectation has been, oh, well, art just flows like water through, all society. People end up, if they do give money to an artist, it's out of some sense of charity rather than an understanding that this is actually valued. Like, and
Yeah.
that's where, so that's where, as an artist, you have to advocate for yourself all of the fucking time because nobody else is.
No.
Nobody cares. Like,
Yeah.
on a really, this is, and I try not to be too dour about this, but on a certain level, artists are both treated as saints and as degenerates because saints in the sense that you are doing something that other people can't do, a degenerate in that people can't figure out what your value is other than entertaining them, and they don't recognize that that entertainment is itself a value worth paying money for.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's ever something that's going to change necessarily, but that's just how it is right now. So
Yeah.
anyway, going on that thread, advocate for yourself. Like, I'll just
Well,
repeat that.
it's interesting that you say that because in the past year or so, when I've been considering, with getting my film work going again, um, I was having the observation that so many independent filmmakers, the first thing that they do when they get done with a film, they dump it on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, and then they jump on like Facebook groups. And if they made a short horror film, it's just they jump in a horror film or a horror group on Facebook. They'll spam the shit out of you with the link to the thing, and nobody ever clicks it. A couple people maybe here or there that are just kind of idiots that, and then they want to trash it or they just don't say anything about it at all and doesn't catch traction. So I was looking at it and I was thinking about just exactly what you said, where I was like, you know what? Even if I set the price point at $1, I have established that there is a value to what I'm
Right.
doing. And immediately, by establishing that I think it has value, anyone who looks at it is going to say, oh, that costs something. That means it's worth my time. Whereas if I posted it for free, someone's going to look at that and go, oh, they didn't invest any money into this. They kind of half assed it, and that's why this is
Yep.
free. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't value it, they won't value it either.
No,
So
that's true.
you have to kind of, it may be hard, especially when you're unproven to an audience, to get them to risk that money. But if you think about it, there's a fair amount of art that goes out there every single day from, I guess the way that they're vouched for is when you have a large distributor put out your work, whether it be a film company
Right.
or a comics publisher or whatever it may be. That's the credibility that it's looking for. So that's really where it comes down to, is where your audience is looking for, am I going to get the bang for my buck?
Yep.
And if you don't say, hey, this costs $5 to watch this, that's pretty nothing. It's $5, but it's something to me because it, like you said, if 1,000 people pay $5, I'm gonna be
Yeah,
making my budget
exactly.
back. But
Exactly.
I think a lot of artists, and I'm trying not to drag artists here and confuse them with the people of the internet who are just seeking validation. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who just do shit because they want the likes or the retweets or the whatever.
Yep.
And that kind of pollutes the artist culture of the world and the internet specifically and
Yeah.
devalues any opportunity that an artist might have.
It's because artists in general, like, because the average artist doesn't value themselves, that art in general is devalued. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
I don't know. This isn't the podcast to start the revolution, but like,
Or
I
maybe
hope
it
that
is.
whoever's listening, who draws or makes videos or whatever it is that you do, if you're posting it to the internet, make sure that you're making people around you aware that of at the very least, make them aware of what it cost you to do. At the very least,
Yeah.
make them on some level aware of what went into making it, because people are not at all aware of what it costs to make movies, short films, comics, whatever. Like, even if it's not a major cost in like hard resources, it's always a cost in time.
Yes.
And nobody pays attention to how much time it takes to make anything, quite frankly, because there's so much of it. Like, it's like an episode of Trailer Park Warlock for me is about, it's about a 35 to 45 hour job.
Wow.
And it's a good amount of time, right? Like, will I mean, it's about 6 to 8 hours every day, and I work every single day pretty much. Like, I took a break
Sunday
for
through
thanks
Sunday, you mean?
Yeah, I took a break for Thanksgiving this year, and I took a break for Christmas, and so far that's been about it. I'll probably take a break after the season's done, but when I'm working on the season, it's a pretty continuous, and there are like some dips in how much I work, depending on what time of the, like what period of production it is.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, every single one of those hours, uh, should be paid. Should
Yeah.
be, you should be compensated for
And
appropriately.
I want to bring up a valid point where when you say paid, and then you followed it up with the word that I was going to say, compensation is the one that I kind of gravitate more towards because I wanted to tell this little story. Um, since it's story time today, I guess. Uh, so again, Haunted, the script that I wrote. Um, I had slaved over this thing, and I'm talking not months, years to write this screenplay. Okay, it took me at least probably 2 years, countless drafts, rejection from film festivals left and right on the screenplay until I finally was able to get it to a point where A, I was proud of it, B, I wanted to make it, C, it was winning awards at screenplay festivals left and right, and D, people were interested about it. Where I would, talk about this thing, or I would post a picture of the newest award that it won or whatever, and there was a following waiting for this film to be released. That had value to me. That was important to me because the way I was looking at it was, all right, Digits was competent, but that was a long time ago, and I think I've lost my credibility by not being so prolific and generating content from the filmmaking end in such a long time. I have to rebuild my audience. I have to have a film to hang my name on that I can be able to say, that's mine. I did that, and this is what I can do. So when the opportunity came where an investor came along, um, a production company was kind of tacked on with him. So I was in negotiation with them, and the original deal that they offered me was that he was going to invest in the film, the production company was going to produce it, and I was going to direct it. Fantastic.
Right.
Fantastic. I turn around and then I start saying, I get to the fun part of the conversation, and I'm like, well, how are we going to do payment? Because I'm going to have to take time off of my day job to direct, do pre-production, do the editing, do this, do that, yada yada yada. And they were like, well, we can pay you so and so much for the direction. And I was like, okay, that should be able to float my bills enough. And I said, well, how much am I going to get paid for the screenplay? And they said, oh, we're not going to pay you for that. Oh,
Hmm. Yeah,
uh,
because I mean that should be an upfront, like at least some kind of advance or whatever, right?
yeah, 2 years of work, all the money that I spent putting it into film festivals, whether it got rejected or awarded, that
Yeah.
costs money. That's like $50 a
Yeah.
pop. And you know what I mean? Like
That's the
that's
thing that
that.
already has upfront value on it. So like,
Right.
yeah.
And it shows that I have demonstrated there is a audience that is going to be purchasing this, and that's how I've built a following for you know what I mean? Like I've already
Yeah.
made you money by doing all of this. Like, why would you devalue that? So then I turned it around and I said to them, okay, if I'm not getting paid for the screenplay, I want final cut on the script or on the movie, which I thought was a fair enough negotiation. You know, I wrote the script. Why couldn't I be able to say, okay, this is the final cut. This is how it's going to go, yada, yada, yada. They didn't want to do that. And then they countered with, well, we're actually going to pay you less to direct it than we said before. That's when things started getting bad. And it came down to the point where they were trying to lowball me by saying, hey, this movie's not going to happen unless you do it our way.
Yeah.
And I had a choice to face, which was, do I make the movie just so it gets made, which any filmmaker will tell you is a miracle in itself to get your movie made? Or do I take my script and go home? Do I say, fuck it all and let it sit on a shelf and collect dust and maybe never get seen? And for me as an artist, I had to value all of the time that I put in, the characters I created, the concept that I had finally executed to a way that I enjoyed and other people enjoyed and was considerably worth money. That this company wanted to make it. Film festivals were awarding it so that they could say, hey, we read that script. We thought it was good before it was a movie, yada, yada, yada. I took my ball and went home. And so many people were mad at me that were in my close circles. They were like, are you out of your mind? They were going to make the movie and you were going to get paid this. And I was like, that's not even minimum wage. I wasn't even getting paid minimum wage to make this movie. And at the end of it all, they could come in and fuck it all up, and my name is on it. So now it's a piece of shit, and everyone says, "Oh, you're Andrew Casarco. You made that piece of shit horror movie I saw. Oh, it was so bad." What am I going to tell? Oh, it wasn't my fault. I didn't have final da 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 da. No, my name's on it. That's my brand. That's me as an artist. That's quote unquote what I'm capable of, even though it wouldn't have been in my hands. So for me, I had to value my abilities and take my ball and go home as an artist. So to me, compensation is more than just money. It's also about being able to execute the art as you see fit. I think that's important in terms of art. And it's one of those things where art is funny because there is no finite way to make a script, a movie, a comic book, a painting where you know it's gonna work. Like there's like you know what I mean? Like it's not like a machine, an ice cream machine where you pull the handle and the soft serve comes out. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
Art is different, and the only person you can really trust sometimes is yourself. So, to me, compensation is more about money. It's more about artist fulfillment, and I had to value that. So Haunted currently sits on my script or on my shelf right now as a script, and I'm working towards getting it made the right way, the way that I
really like that description of it because that gives me a lot of perspective on. So, like, I mean, my current project right now, right, with Trailer Park Warlock, like the monetary compensation for it, it's fine, right? Like, it's not the best ever, but it's fine. My compensation in terms of how much freedom I have is like you can't find better. You cannot find better. And that is something that like I'm super thankful about with this job because it also in terms of setting standards, like that's about as high as the standard as you can set. Like I get to do what I want pretty much with like every once in a while I have to change, like every once in a while there's some little thing and it's not that big of a deal. But having that stand, you know, it is in terms of thinking about compensation as an artist, it is often about getting used to the idea that your standards are going to change and you want to make sure it changes going upward, right? You don't want to go downward. But getting used to that idea of how do you want your standard to continually progress? And then the trick becomes, you know, effectively engineering that.
Yeah. Because the time, again, we talked about this almost every episode. The time is the biggest factor. And if you can hit that standard in a certain time block, that's why deadlines always become important to me. Or otherwise you'd never finish.
Well, so
Because
that's
if
a really good thing to bring up in terms of like, because oftentimes this is something that took me a while to kind of figure out and understand, is that in terms of like if somebody approaches you and they're like, hey, I want to hire you to do this thing, how much do you, or they will offer, maybe often they will offer what they think is a fair amount. But for you as the artist, you have to sort of think about the actuality of it, right? So you have to actually budget how much time is it going to take, and then actually come up with some kind of standardization for yourself of I am worth X amount per hour, regardless of what it is that I'm doing. It needs to be like whatever, like 20, 25, 30 an hour, and then make sure that's like a hard line, because otherwise you will get pushed back on that, and that's going to affect you long term, right? Like that's going to affect you over the course of the project. It's going to affect your quality of life, your quality of involvement, investment into the project itself. Because if you're not feeling great, your work's not going to be feeling great either, and it's going to reflect and it's going to negatively affect future work. But would you have any additional insights into that particular, like in terms of time and in terms of budgeting time, basically?
Well, part of the I guess even though I've went to a college and got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in filmmaking, and this is a podcast that I think you and I are going to look forward to doing in the future, but the value of an education in the arts is
Sure.
definitely a broad topic to discuss, but I don't want to get too deep in the weeds this episode about that. When it comes to filmmaking and stuff like that, a lot of the technical prep that goes into it, because and I'm not trying to demean, and you can feel free to correct me if I'm overlooking here, but in terms of illustration, you typically know how to draw a
Right.
figure in a certain way, whereas when as a filmmaker, when I walk onto a set, every set is always different. The lighting source is different. There's going to be audio that might be interfering from a refrigerator or from traffic nearby or something, and I need to know how to troubleshoot all of that stuff way ahead of time. So that includes going to the location, scouting it out, checking for light. What time of day are we shooting? How many actors are there? Is there going to be crowd control? So a lot of the prep that goes into it. So I can look at a production schedule and say, okay, we're shooting for 14 days. That does not mean I should be budgeting just to get paid for 14 days, because I'm probably working 70 days
So you
just
always,
to
oh damn, wow.
just to get the equipment, make sure the equipment is working, having the stylistic choices predetermined so that when we get there we can efficiently get it executed, make sure that I can execute it before I even get there. And then like after the fact, there's like reshoots, all that kind of stuff. Do you want to build that in ahead of time? Like, you know what I mean? Like, or you got to be upfront with it. You have to. That's the downside of filmmaking, is that everything has to be planned out, and even the planning costs money. So
Right.
to look for them to look at me when I'm getting hired as a director and say, "Oh, we're paying you for the 14 days that you're on set, talking to the actors, telling the cinematographer where to point the camera, what kind of shot you want, what lens, yada yada yada." They think that's the work, and it's not. The work comes the first 60 days before there, 2 months while we're scouting and storyboarding and finding the actors and casting and raising the money and doing all this and that. So one of the things that as a filmmaker you need to budget for, or at least plan for in your rate, is how much time it's going to cost outside of production. That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing. And to my point from before, if you're writing the script, that's part of it, baby. That's 2 years of my life that
Right.
I was downstairs in my basement, not spending time with my wife, or going to the movies, or hanging with my friends, or doing something fun. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm sitting in a dark room with a computer screaming at the Final Draft software because I don't know what the next scene should be about. That's that's years off my life. That's the gray hairs in my beard, and that costs something. Like you need to value that. Um, that's my only thing is that overcharge. I guess it's, in summation, overcharge because
That's
even when you get done, you're gonna be like, I didn't charge enough. Like
yeah,
it's always
exactly.
a bigger headache than you expect. There, I have a mantra in life. It's always going. You don't have as much time as you think you have, and it's always going to cost more than you think it will.
Yeah,
That's
that's true.
everything in life. I don't care if you're going to McDonald's for a cheeseburger. That walk to McDonald's is going to take 2 minutes longer than you expected because there's a hobo on the side of the street. He's going to hit you up for a change. And when you say no, thank you, he's going to get in your way and start talking about the weather and this and that. And you're going to get to McDonald's and they're going to say, oh, prices went up. Ha 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 ha. And it's 10 cents more for the cheeseburger and this and that. Plan for that shit to happen. And if
Yeah.
it doesn't, hey, I made a little extra money. Overcharge. As an artist,
Yeah.
you should overcharge.
Yeah,
Period.
because there is a lot of there is a lot of feast and famine kind of a thing that happens where I mean you'll find I don't know you'll find yourself in moments where there's way too much going on and then there are moments where the wind goes out of your sails and you don't know when the next thing comes up. So that's yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying.
Not to
Um,
mention, just to tack on, not to
yeah,
interrupt, but there's one more thing. Uh, unless you already know the client, you need to be prepared for notes. Because you could budget the time because you know your skills and you can execute exactly how you think it is. Depending on the client, they're going to come back with notes. Can you change this? I want that. I was doing wedding videos for a short while, and
yeah,
that's why I stopped because bridezillas are the worst. And it was just, can you cut Aunt Harriet out? She's not speaking to my side of the family anymore, and I don't want her in the video. She was the one conducting the ceremony. I don't care. All right, I'll blur her face. That costs
yeah.
time. Like you know what I mean? Like you didn't know that. So budget for client notes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's actually where I eat the most like loss is usually in doing re-edits or whatever because I don't usually take them into account. And I need to in the future for commissions specifically. Um, but yeah, that's a really good tip and something. So like I said, I'm going to commit to memory, and then something I also was thinking about just on this topic. It kind of has to be. It's a muscle that you kind of, or it's a thing that you learn over time, figuring out how to budget how much time it takes to do a
Yeah.
project, right? Like it's one of those things where you have to do it so much to where you get to a point where you no longer even have to think about it. Somebody can tell you a project, you know, already in your mind kind of automatically say, okay, that's going to be about 20, 30 hours. So I'm saying all this because what do you have any ideas or bit of advice for new artists on I know that we've kind of covered that a lot already, but do you have any other advice for new artists on like on thinking about how to budget their time in any other ways? Because as a new when you're starting it out, it's all very abstract and
Mm.
it's very easy to get into a mindset of like I'm some newbie in this game. They already know like how much to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm saying this question as a question, but I'm gonna kind of veer into a story here for a second. So my second art job that I got was as a colorist for Plants vs Zombies, and so once again, I didn't really understand that you could negotiate rates. So I was given like, hey, here's $60 a page rate. Let us know if you want to do this job. So I did look over the contract, but I never had anything to compare to. So I was just like, this looks fine, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't really much of a contract. It was like a work for hire thing. So it was kind of just like, you do work, we give you money. That's it. So anyway, had I known better, had I had my future knowledge, I would have some things I would have considered is negotiating. Hey, how about some royalties? How about maybe let's tack on another $10 on that page rate. Long story short, I ended up like, because they still had work for me to do with them, but I ended up bowing out of that job because they wouldn't raise my page rate over a certain amount, and I kept asking for a raise because I knew that they could afford. I knew that they could. Well, and here's another part, right? The whole metagaming thing of like understanding how much budget your client has.
Good luck with that one, though.
Right. But my point being is, had I known better, I would have asked for a better budget and then asked for royalties because I would have made sick money off of the royalties.
Yeah.
And that's money that would continue. But nevertheless, I did it, and it's not something that was on my mind. So anyway, going back to my whole thing when talking when talking about the stuff with the newbies, I guess. What do you have any other suggestions on top of all this in regards to how not to get swindled, I guess?
Well, there's a couple of things well, at least two things that I can throw out there. Number one, and I feel like artists are terrible at this. And I know I am. I'm not gonna assume that all artists. Well, I am. I'm just gonna do it. I assume that all artists are equally as terrible as I am at this. Sit down, assign yourself a personal project, clock the goddamn hours it takes for you to start and finish that entire project. Keep track. Literally write down on a fucking pad. Started at 1 p.m. on Tuesday the 25th. Boom. Stopped at lunch. Ba 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 ba. Started. Ba ba ba. Keep a fucking tab of every second it took you to do it. Look at how many hours it actually took. Because one of the things that I always did is I undercut myself. Be like, oh yeah, that's about 2 or 3 hours of editing. No, it was like 7. Like that adds up. It sounds like it's just okay, you were off by a little bit. No, and over the course of several projects, that adds up. So literally clock yourself, and that way you, like you said, you build that idea. So you don't necessarily have to eat it. You could be building portfolio pieces or just training yourself on how to do new techniques of whatever it is that you're doing, but clock yourself, literally clock yourself. And then, bare minimum, look at it in terms of say, okay, minimum wage is $15 or whatever now.
Yeah.
Times it by that. And then we talked about building it in. Assume that you're not going to get another project.
Yes.
The way that I go about it, or at least that I did when I first started trying to figure out my rate, I looked at it as, okay, my bills are monthly. I get charged every month. So if I only have one project, it has to cover everything for the entire month. And that's kind of how I did it. And that did jack up my rate incredibly high. But when you find someone willing to pay it, then you're set for the month. And then you can go out and hustle and try and find more clients and this and that, or they come back or are happy or whatever. But your bills are paid for that month. Number two, and this is something I've recently stumbled upon. It's a little low down and dirty, kind of schemy way of doing it, but there's not anything really wrong with it. I find people in the realm of which I'm planning to work, and I act as if I have a project that I want them to do, and I ask for their rate.
That's actually really brilliant. I
get a summation of the rates, and I kind of look at it and I'm like, I do like an average. I drop the high, I drop the low, and then I go in there and I'm like, okay, that's what the going rate is at the moment. I can ask for something like that, or if I'm living comfortably and I've got a little nest egg or something, maybe I undercut a little bit because I would rather build the client base than make a ton of money at the moment. It really depends on your living circumstances. Most artists are eating paycheck to paycheck if they're eating at all. But the idea is kind of go into your wheelhouse and reach out to clients. An easy way to do it, and this is a stupid way on how I found out about this. I was on Instagram, and I like one of the things that I've really been getting into lately alternative movie posters. So there's these fantastic illustrators who are doing these beautiful pieces for old movies. And some of them are Struzan-esque, but a lot of them kind of deviate from the tried and true, done to death Drew Struzan mountain of heads.
Yeah.
And I'm loving it. So there's tons of them, and this one poster posted a poster for The Dark Knight. Okay, and it was Heath Ledger's Joker from the end of the movie, and he was falling like when Batman throws him off the side of the ledge, and he's falling towards the viewer of the poster, and his jacket is spread out in a way that it forms the Dark Knight Batman logo, and I was like, that's fucking great. I liked it. And you know how Instagram's algorithms work. You like something with a certain hashtag, and then it suggests other things to you in your timeline. Thrift shop post shows up of The Dark Knight, and it's a Heath Ledger Joker t-shirt. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I have that t-shirt. And I look at the thing, and it says, we're selling this t-shirt for $1,500. I'm like, that's a goddamn movie t-shirt for $1,500? Are you out of your fucking minds? So I go on eBay, and I messaged, and I'm thinking to myself, and I dug it out. I had two of the same shirt, two of them. And they're too big for me because I got them when I was fat. It was two XLs. So I'm not wearing those shirts anymore. I'm down to a medium. So obviously I'm either going to collect that and keep it in pristine condition, or I'm going to sell it. So I just messaged the guy. Instead of saying, hey, I have two shirts, what would you give me for them? I know he's going to low cut me because he wants to make a profit off of it and this and that.
Yeah.
So I acted as a buyer and said to him, hey, how come that shirt costs $1,500? I'm just curious. And he gave me a whole bunch of nonsense about why it's so rare and this and that. And then he was thinking I was going to buy it. He's like, well, would you like to make me an offer? And I said, well, I have two of them. And then as soon as I started talking to him about that, he was like, well, it really just goes by the last rate of the shirt. The last time that shirt sold, it sold for about $1,700. So now I'm selling it for $1,500. But you really got to find someone who's willing to pay that for it, for it to really be the price. And I'm like, you just tried to sell me that shirt for $1,500. Don't try and undercut yourself now. But the lesson that I took from that was I could talk to somebody who's already doing what I think I might do and kind of get a justification for why I'm going to do something. So even if you're not just looking for the money, if you're looking to get into a particular field, maybe reach out to a director or a writer or whoever it may be, not just ask about their rate or whatever like that, but also ask them what comes along with that rate. What do I get?
Yeah.
And then you start realizing the things that can fall into your arsenal as add-ons. So a good way to do it is to have a really low base price, and then you can have additional add-ons. So in the film world, I can come on and be a cinematographer for your movie for $700 a day, or you can get me for $950, and I'll bring my kit. I'll bring my camera, my tripod, this and that, and you don't have to pay a shit ton of money that comes with renting all that, the rental insurance, yada, yada, yada. I get a little bit of a boost. My camera's already paid off. I'm making money off of that. So there's ways to kind of attribute yourself. So like when I was doing the Fiverr thing, I was doing that very thing. I was doing, okay, 10 to 12 page script. Do you want rewrites? That's an extra so-and-so money. You want an extra 10 pages? Yeah. That's extra money. You want me to write a sequel to this? That's extra money. Do you want a ghostwriter credit? AKA, I would forfeit my name to the script and you could take it and credit it to yourself. That costs this much money. And that way it's nickel and diming, yes. But the way I understood it, and this is a lesson I learned when I worked at Dairy Queen, sprinkles cost extra, and people used to complain about it. They were like, well, why do the sprinkles cost extra? And it's like, well, actually, if you're just getting a vanilla cone, it's cheaper now. We're not making everybody pay for the sprinkles, and not everybody's getting it. So it's cheaper that way. So that's what, you can justify it that way. But there's all kinds of different ways that you can do it. And I don't think you should feel bad about the way you structure your monetization, because all artists, I don't think, yes, the dream is to sell that multi-million-dollar idea, concept, franchise, whatever it may be, and just be done with everything.
Right.
But I think most artists are just trying to eat. We just want to wake up,
exactly.
do the art, get paid, and go to sleep. Like
Yeah.
that's it. We don't want to have to stress about paying the bill. So don't feel bad about it. Don't feel bad about asking the money. Bring up money all the time. Be upfront about it. Negotiate, like you said, negotiate. Talk about it. Be comfortable with it.
And most importantly, too, I would say, like, it's really important for artists to talk to each other about how much they're
Yes.
making on their work. And it's not,
Yep.
it's definitely not happening enough. In the comic books industry, a couple, I want to say maybe about 4 years ago or something, there was a project done where somebody basically anonymously polled comic artists on how much they were getting paid by different publishers, because a lot of artists will work, with different publishers at any given point. So somebody could be working as, an artist for Marvel and also Dark Horse at the same time. Either they're working on multiple books, or they're doing like backup work, or sometimes there are artists who are also doing a lot of assistant work. It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But regardless, as it turned out, as the information from this poll came out, uh, the the amount of payment was wildly different depending on the publisher. And it could be, for smaller presses, like $30 a page, which is ridiculous. And then, for like a big press like DC or Marvel, anywhere from 250 to 500 a page, which is like okay. Like 500 is not bad at all, but 250 is probably on the low end.
Okay, so 30 is bad ridiculous, not ridiculous good.
Yes.
Okay.
30 is like 30 is poverty wage, like less than minimum wage kind of thing. So anyway, I wish I could remember the name of that project, because it would be useful for a lot of illustrators to know about it, but I'm sure you could Google it and find
Yeah.
it. But anyway, I think things like that need to happen for every industry where in the arts, because people really need to be aware of, what people are being paid, so that they
The
can
going rate.
find. Yeah, exactly. So they can find a prevailing wage that allows everybody, or as many people as possible, to eat, to fucking eat.
It's true. And you know something, and one other thing that I wanted to throw out there. I won't be long-winded about this one, I promise. Remember when I said overcharge? And
Yeah.
then I was also talking about the haunted thing. Um, Ask for more things than you really want. Because then when you negotiate, you can give away shit that you didn't want to begin with. And
Yeah, like
the
like
client will think that they're wearing you down, but in actuality, you didn't give a shit about that to begin with. You just
I've
wanted
heard
A, B,
I've
and
heard about
C.
this in film a lot, where it's like directors will take do all sorts of extra scenes, just so, like, I mean, this is kind of different, but just so that, like, the MPAA will request those scenes to be cut instead of the scenes that are really important for them.
Yes. I've heard of that done a million times. I've also heard it done in the opposite way, where people have shot minimal stuff so that when the MPAA says you have to cut this, they turn around and say, we don't have another shot. Granted, that was back in like 1996,
Yeah.
where reshoots were not such a prevalent thing. Whereas nowadays, it's like, well, go reshoot it. And that's it. Um, but yes, no, there is definitely that mindset of fuckery, I guess you could call it, where it's just people are planning for the fight before they even get to it. It's like, I know this fight's coming with the studio, I know it's coming with the MPAA, I know it's coming with the financiers, whatever it may be, and they will do certain things to put themselves in positions to negotiate or fight or whatever it may be to get what they want in the long run. The problem is when they turn around and talk about it on the internet or in interviews and podcasts or whatever it may be, the
Yeah.
studios are listening. So they're clearly the executives who has nothing else to do other than to green light the movies for the thing is figuring out a way to stop that fuckery from going down. So, it's one of those things where creativity is not just happening be in front of the camera. It's actually happening in the boardroom as well. You gotta be a creative business person with everything,
Yeah.
whether it's finding out your rate, negotiating the rate, whatever it may be, negotiating the job. You got to be creative with it, and I think it really starts off with proving yourself and your brand or your style or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Showcase that there's an audience for it. There's a difference between demonstrating your ability and being an internet sensation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of people confuse that. They say, "Oh, look at how many followers I have. Look at how many likes this post got." Da, 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 da. I mean, yeah, it's apples and oranges in a way, because sometimes that does prove that you are in demand as an artist. Sometimes it just proves there's 60,000 Russian bots that you paid
Right.
some crazy company to follow you for. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where you just got to prove your ability, and that's very much your portfolio. Um, Building a website for yourself and showing what you've done. I've taken jobs in the past that were at prostitution level rates, where it's just like I'm getting completely lowballed here, but but I can put Saturday Night Live on my resume. I can put ESPN on my resume. So
Oh
when I
yeah.
turn around and I look at a client, I also have to look at their value and say, okay, they're fucking me on price, but I can say I worked on this project for ESPN. And when you go to somebody who's kind of not knowing the realm that you're in, it was like an
Yeah.
outside client, you could say, I've worked for ESPN, I've worked for Saturday Night Live, I've worked for this, I've da 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 da. That justifies your rate. So sometimes it is about eating it, doing a project for free. I know a lot of filmmakers who are like really, really good, experienced cinematographers, grips, whatever it may be. They will work on short films for free in the hopes that the director that they're working for is going to be the next Jordan Peele or the next so and so who hits it off, because 9 times out of 10 the director will keep that crew for the
Right.
project that they did, because they like that cohesiveness. That shorthand allows them to move faster. They know what they're getting. That grip, that gaffer, that cinematographer, that sound designers, whoever, have proven their brand by doing it. So sometimes you do have to do it for free. You do have to do it for copy and credit and lunch, which 10 times out of 10 is pizza. But 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 at the same time, you also have to evaluate after the fact. I think that's important, and I think you would talk about this too. You talk about what your future self knew. Um, I think it's very important after every single project that you do, whether it's paid or not, reflecting upon how it went and using that information as you go forward is the most
Yeah.
valuable thing that you can do in determining your rate and your value of your work. Because otherwise, you're going to be sitting in the same place forever.
Yeah,
Did I get
exactly.
better? Did I get worse? Was this client worth the hassle? That's the one I always ask myself. Was this worth the hassle? I just took a job for $1,000. I thought it was going to be a 2 week job. It turned into 3 months. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't
Yeah.
expect it to go like that. And so next time I realized, next time I talk to this client, I got to say, listen, that's great and all. I really enjoyed working for you, but this went way too long. I needed to go like this time. If not, we can talk about it. And, you set yourself up for compensation where it's like, I want to be able to do this. So my rate's going to be this much. And then they say, well, what if you don't do that? Then you can take yourself down a little bit, and then you're not expected to do that thing again. That's beneficial.
That's super beneficial. So, we're getting on the hour mark. So I'm thinking about just what we were talking about, and so I would just, for myself personally, I would sum up sort of our conversation as, remind yourself that your work's worth something other than just pride, and pride's good, right? Be proud of your work, be proud of what you're doing, but it is also worth your uh, food on your table,
Mm.
and advocate for yourself, talk with other artists, figure out what they're doing in terms of how they're getting their budgets, how they're figuring that stuff out, how much they're getting paid for what they do, and be prepared for pushback. And be prepared for what to do if you do get pushback.
Be prepared in general, I think, is the best way
Yeah.
to say it. Go into the meeting expecting to talk numbers, and have something ready. Have your
Yeah.
your high number and your ceiling and your floor.
Yeah, and don't be afraid of numbers either.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of high numbers. Don't be afraid to ask for a ridiculous amount, because you can always be negotiated down.
Right.
Way
And
harder to negotiate up.
Right. And you're the one that controls that negotiation in terms of your thing, because you can just walk away. And that's the truth of it. I mean, sometimes you can't, but that's when you got to eat it.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think we've helped some people today. I think we've talked about some of our experiences and, really about finding your worth. And at the end of the day, guys, it's up to you to kind of determine what you think you're worth. I do want to tack on one thing, and it's not even a whole rant. It's just also be humble, know your limits.
Right.
A lot of people will promise things that they don't know how to do or can't do or know that they can't do. Don't do that. Don't be that asshole, because then you're going to start hindering it not only for yourself and get a bad reputation. Reputation's a big point of negotiation and everything too. But you're also going to give a bad name to other artists in your area. So don't do that. Don't be that person. But yeah, that's how I think we should end this. I think you guys know what you got to do, what you got to look for, and know your worth. That's it.
Yep. A lifelong struggle. But it's a struggle worth having. So, anyway.
Yeah. Good luck, guys. We're out.
Later.